This year, to try and incentivize myself to do more than just work, I've been gamifying my life. Effectively, the way it works is that by completing tasks in different life areas that aren't work, I earn experience points. As I earn the experience points, these can be used to level up. By leveling up, I earn rewards and just feel more fulfilled in doing things that aren't my regular day job. Despite doing a whole bunch of pre-planning to ensure I had all of the tasks organized, my leveling system, knowing what my rewards were going to be, we're only a month in and I've already made a heap of changes. I already knew going into it that that was going to be the case. I didn't want to start with a perfect system, mainly because if it wasn't perfect, which it wasn't, then I'd feel down about myself and be like, oh, well, we're on day 3, might as well throw in the towel, we're just not going to do this for the rest of the year. I want this to be a system that works, and I want it to be a system that works for me, so I went in with the mindset that this wasn't going to be perfect, it wasn't its final form, we could still make changes. In this video, we're going to look at what my progress was across the first month, what changes I've made, and how I'm adjusting my process moving forward. Rather than going through in the order of looking at what I was doing, looking at what worked, and then looking at what didn't, because everything is so kind of interconnected with each other, we're going to have a space-based analysis. So looking at where I'm recording information and what's working in that space in particular, that kind of thing. The first space we notably have is this journal here. This one is my yearly collections journal. It has layouts that I set up for the entire of the year. You can see it has a purple band on here because I use it year upon year. So all of the stuff at the front here, that is from 2022 to 2024. And then in here we get to 2025. If we just take that off so we can see what we're working with. This page here is my character summary. This one is working just fine. I haven't printed off my picture yet to stick it in. I'll do it eventually. I just need to find when I have a little bit of spare space on a sticker sheet. I don't like to waste any space on the sticker sheets, and I often forget that I still need to do this, so I should probably write that down. On here though, you can see I have colored in character level 1 because I did achieve enough points in January to level up. And I have also gone and put some check marks down next to the different skill levels. This is actually out of date though, so I need to go and add some more. So I'm currently on level 3 for vitality. I'm on level 2 for spirit, or I've achieved up to level 2. And then I've achieved level 3 for insight, stewardship, prosperity, charisma, and gaiety. Now, I'm actually kind of glad that I am as behind on this as I was, because come the end of cycle 1 or the end of January, I had a little bit of a look at the levels I'd achieved and thought that something wasn't quite right. I'd actually managed to achieve up to level 4 in some categories, and it just kind of felt like I should have to wait longer for that to happen. Or more so, I didn't want to get through 4 out of 10 levels just in the first month of the year, because I want to be able to level up, I don't know, more frequently throughout the rest of the year, if that kind of makes sense. My leveling system is based so that we achieve those earlier levels kind of quickly, kind of similar to a video game where you level up quite fast at the start. But I knew that if the gap between leveling up was too large for the rest of the year, that was going to be kind of demotivating. So I did go in and change how that works, but we'll talk more about it when we look at the spreadsheet. Main objectives is more so just what my goals are for each of the quarters of the year, so that one's not specifically related to the game. And a similar idea with my side quests here, but I've been doing those, which is kind of nice to see. This one could also be thought of as a 52 things in 52 weeks list, so just 52 things I want to do across the year. One of those being reaching level 1 in all skill areas. I don't know the date this happened though, I need to go and consult my spreadsheet for that. Nothing else in this journal is very specifically related to the game. We do have the mastery builder, which is 25 things that I want to do 25 times across the year. And some of these things are stuff that I also get points for, but this is more just like a different way to kind of gamify that information. It's not specifically related to getting points. For instance, a 1 liter water day, I do get points if I drink water, whereas if we compare it to something like live streaming or doing bonus videos, I don't have trade or my job in the game because the game is supposed to incentivize me to do things outside of my job. So this one is only minimally related, but it does technically have a lot of the same categories. So like vitality for the skill, we have spirit for the skill, that kind of stuff. The next notebook-based system that I'm capturing information in is my everyday journal. This one, like the name suggests, gets used every single day. It holds things like my task lists, my calendars, schedules, that kind of thing. But in terms of the layouts related to the game specifically, we start in the front here with my projects and rewards space. You can see I don't have projects in every single area yet, but as I think of the project, I come and add them in, and I also list them with the number of points that I'll achieve once I complete that project. This information is also saved in my spreadsheet so that I can easily total those points up, but I liked the idea of having this in my journal as well, mainly so that I can color in a little box. I just find that very satisfying. So far, the only one that I managed to color in is making the 2025 budget. Thankfully, that got done at the start of January, and actually we did set financial goals and targets, so I can color that one in as well. Like most of my start of journal pages, I'm not the greatest at coming back to check in with this, but the next section we have is related to the rewards for leveling up in each of the categories. Figuring out the rewards that I wanted to give myself for these is actually really tricky, mainly because typically speaking, I previously haven't really given myself rewards for a job well done. It's more like oh, you get the satisfaction of the job well done, that is your reward. Or the act of having done the thing, that is the reward. But I do want to use different things to incentivize myself, and I have found that I have completed enough stuff to get certain rewards, but I haven't necessarily actually rewarded myself with the thing yet. For instance, for Vitality, which I'm up to level 3 in, my reward is a 1-day recipe, or effectively getting to make one of those recipes that I keep telling myself like, oh, I really want to do that, I really want to do that, and just never getting to it. Not a recipe that takes a full day to make. So as said, I have achieved up to level 3, I have technically achieved that reward, I just haven't given it to myself yet. So I need to be a little bit better about making sure that I check in with this space or check in with the reward space I have in my digital version of this information, and actually schedule the time to reward myself in the ways that I've told myself I will. There are also some levels that I have achieved but not thought of a reward for, so I maybe need to go and add in something just like quite small that I can do quite easily for those. So Spirit for level 2, for instance. We also have Initiative. I've achieved up to level 3 of Initiative and I only have the first reward sussed out, whereas for other ones I have quite a few things, so it's a kind of a balancing act here. I think it would also be good to have noted somewhere when I reached these levels. It would be nice to have that information. If and when I remake this layout in my next journal, because my everyday journal only lasts 6 months, I might end up adding that information in, but we'll have to wait and see. And I notably also have to go and add in the point amounts for each of these. The reason that I held off on doing this is because I knew going into the game that I wasn't going to have everything perfect from day one. I knew that I wasn't going to have the points in the exact right ratios. I knew I was probably going to add or change the different tasks I was recording, and I definitely did that across the month. But I'm very glad that I went in with the mindset of just knowing that it wasn't complete, just knowing that it wasn't perfect yet, because if I had have gotten to, I don't know, day 3 or something and been like, oh, I forgot to record XYZ of a task and now I can't record it and I'm going to throw the whole thing away because it wasn't perfect from day 1. And I know that that sounds maybe a little bit silly, but that is literally how my mind usually works. So I'm pleased with myself for having got into this, thinking of it more as kind of like a trial run or an experiment or something that kind of can adapt over time. Now as we're at the end of cycle 1 though, or at the end of January, I think that the points are a lot more stable, so I probably will go and write these in soon. I might give it a half month more just so that I'm 100% sure about it, because even within the last 3 days I ended up adding an additional task and changing some things around too. In terms of how adding tasks changes the point values, this is based on the kind of things that I want to do repeatedly or on a really regular basis. So for instance, if there's a new routine that I want to include in the game that, gives me points towards the game, that will then alter the number of points that I'm in theory earning on a given week or month or whatever else. Because the way that the point requirements for each level are calculated, they're kind of based on those ideals of when I'm going to be doing things and how often I'm going to be doing things. It means that by adding those into the game, it changes the number of points required for the levels. This isn't something that has to be done, but it is the way that I'm organizing my game. While this is the start of journal stuff for the game, we also have some monthly stuff as well. In particular, on my monthly dashboard, or this kind of like layout that I have here that outlines the stuff that I want to get done, things that are coming up, stuff I'm excited about, that kind of thing. We have a little section down the bottom here called Life Admin RPG, and you can see that I was aiming to get to level 3 for each of these categories in the month, and then also reaching character level 1. I checked off that I managed to do that, and you might be thinking, wait a second, wasn't one of these categories only at level 2? If we go back into my yearly collections journal, you can see Spirit only got 2 check marks, it's only at level 2, but here I've checked off that I reached level 3, and that was one of the changes that I made really recently. In adjusting not only the tasks tasks that I was including in the game, but also the amount of time that in theory should pass between leveling up, it meant that what I had originally recorded as achieving when I went and checked these off versus what I now have achieved with those changes is slightly different. Does it bother me? Yeah, a little bit, but not so much that I'm gonna go and like fix this layout or anything. Especially considering my targets for each of these were set before I made the changes, so I don't want to just like move the goalpost then be like, oh, you didn't achieve the goal you set for yourself. So it's not so bad. I also have a space in my monthly reflection to note down what levels I did achieve. So while the last one is like, hey, this is the goal you're setting, did you achieve that goal? This one is more, what did you actually get to? Like, yeah, sure, the goal was to get to level 3, maybe I got to level 5. I notably didn't, but you know, this is what this space is for. I'll just list out each of the different life areas and then write down the level I achieved for them. So just like we had in the yearly collections journal, we have character level 1, everything is at level 3 except for spirit, which is at level 2. In terms of tracking my points that I'm earning as part of the game, mostly this is done on the digital space in that spreadsheet, but I also wanted something in my journal to record this as well, mainly because I just like the visual aspect of it. So I set up a life admin point tracker. This one's set up similar to a productivity tracker, which we have a separate video about on the channel, but effectively each of these little boxes just represents something that I've done or something that I could do in relation to the game, and then depending on what color I've colored it in, it's either a 1 point, 3 point, or 5 point task. Now, one of the things that I noted pretty early on was what happens when I do a project, because projects are worth 5, 10, or 15. What I did in this instance was just broke them down into how many 5-point things are within that. So for instance, like if it's worth 5 points, that's 1 little green box. If it's worth 10 points, that's 2 little green boxes. So some of these ones that have quite a few green boxes, that's because these were actually projects, or in part they were projects. While I do like this layout, I love the visual aspect, I think it's a lot of fun, it doesn't necessarily give me a great indication of how many points I was actually earning. So what I did in the end was just write down a number of how many points all of this information represents. So for instance, this was a 41 point day, which got colored in up to here, but this one was a 45 point day because we have more 5-point tasks. While the level of completion, in terms of like how many boxes I've colored in, shows the variety in stuff I was doing, it doesn't necessarily very well show how many points I was actually getting. Similarly, like this is a 46 point day, it's colored in up to here, whereas the 45 point day is just one underneath it, makes sense. But the 41 point day is colored in even higher. Or for a bigger difference, this day here, day 31 or like the 31st of December, that was a 37 point day and is colored in 1 box higher than the 46 point day. I think it does do well to highlight where my motivation was, or like where I was feeling kind of inspired and inclined to do stuff and also record it. So at the start, very eager to get in and do things. On the first day of the year, we had a lot of 5-point tasks, so that's exciting. And then towards this end of the month, I got sick. So my willingness to do even 1-point tasks completely plummeted, but I also wasn't very good about recording when I had done things. So there is a pretty high chance that I did more than I have recorded on these days. It's just that I was sick, so I didn't record it, and then remembering it after the fact was kind of hard. But that's okay, you can only earn points if you actually record them. That's just the way it works. One of the things that this layout was also lacking was not being able to see which tasks I was completing more regularly or to which level I was completing them. Some of my tasks are what I consider to be scale tasks. So if we think about like water intake, I get 1 point for 1 sip of water, 3 points for half a bottle or a liter, and then 5 points for 2 liters. Because I wanted to have a better appreciation of which ones were my kind of problem tasks or the ones I wasn't getting done versus the ones that I'm doing quite consistently, I've decided to step away from this style of tracker, and instead for cycle 2 or February, I'm doing this one. This is effectively what most people would call either a routines or a habit tracker, so just a little set of boxes or like mini calendar grid for each of the different things that I'm keeping track of. In particular, these are the tasks in the game that I want to try and do on pretty much an everyday basis. My points and leveling system are based on me getting these things done to their highest level of completion every single day, and then taking into consideration that perfect is not necessarily what's going to happen, but that's a separate thing. So for each of the little boxes, I can just go and color in when I get things done. So for instance, today I did do daily logging before going on social media and the internet and such. So I can color that one in. That one isn't a scale task. It's either I did it or I didn't do it. So a little pink box to say it's done, or a cross to say it's not done. Something that is a scale task though is something like intentional fun, and that's where I use the level of completion in there as well. So 3 lines means like highest level of completion, 1 line means lowest level of completion that still counts for the game. Thankfully it's pretty easy at this stage to see which ones are scale tasks versus just, I don't know, discrete tasks, or at least that's what I'm calling them. Discrete tasks being either like done versus not done, versus scale being levels of completion. Effectively, any of the ones here that have any kind of pink line through them, those are scale tasks, versus the ones that don't have any pink lines, those ones are discrete tasks. The trick here though is going to be keeping up with this, because I'm not necessarily the greatest typically at filling in monthly trackers, which is why I would usually put these routine trackers in my weekly logs or like on my weekly dashboard. But writing out 12 things for each week felt like it was going to be a little bit too much of a hassle. Also, by having it on here and having the 4-week blocks or the cycle means that I'll get a better appreciation of which ones I am finding more difficult or which ones I am keeping on top of, because I can see that data week after week without having to flip between multiple pages. While this is going to help me keep track of which ones I'm doing, it isn't going to be how I calculate my points. For that, I like to use my spreadsheet because it does the math for me. The spreadsheet is where the majority of my life admin game tracking happens, because it does all the math for me, I don't have to calculate anything. It's also what I use to calculate the different point requirements for all of my levels. But as said, we do have some changes that have happened as I've been going through. Starting first on the summary page, where I've added color coding, mainly because I was finding it kind of tricky to be able to look at the point amounts and just know whether I had leveled up. I figured that having a color coding system would make it very, very easy. And I also put a column down the side here, just so that then I had the number there as well. Just because it has a color code doesn't necessarily mean that I remember what color is associated with which level. As you can see though, orange is for level 2, we've got yellow for level 3, and green for level 4. In terms of how the color coding is done, this is based on each of the different boxes and whether they have a point value over the requirement for each of the levels. So you can see, for instance, in prosperity, for chapter 1, or January cycle 1, I managed to get to level 3, so that's why it's in yellow, but now as we're in chapter 2, or February, I have been able to level up to level 4. Thus that one and the ones following on from it are in green. At this stage, it probably looks a little bit silly, but as the year progresses and as I get more points in each of the subsequent months and such, it will start looking a little bit more rainbow multicolored, and it'll show me where I managed to level up, not necessarily to the day, but at least as the year overall, and how many points I was able to accumulate in each of those months. Notably, there isn't any color coding on the character section. I think I might just do that one manually if I feel so inclined. So technically speaking, for the first one, I have been able to level up to level 1, and my level 1 color is red. If by the end of chapter 2 I have enough points to level up to number 2, I'll color code that one in the orange. The next addition that I made to my spreadsheet was having a weekly breakdown space. This was mainly so that I could see, for any of the tasks that I was doing and points I was accumulating in an individual week, how does this compare to other weeks that have already passed. The functionality on this one is fairly similar to the summary tab, it's just that it looks at specific weeks rather than cycles and the cumulative total that happens across those cycles. So for instance, if we look at vitality, we had 63 points in the first week, 66 in the second, 61 in the third, and 47 in week 4, which makes sense because I wasn't feeling very well. Comparing that to the summary tab, the totals in vitality should just go up across the entire of the year, or up with each subsequent column, because it is a running total. The weekly breakdown isn't a running total, it's just looking at some weekly snapshots. This one is mainly just for interest, doesn't really change anything about the game, it's just a way to help me gauge whether I'm doing better or worse compared to usual, in each of the separate life areas. The next change that I made came on the skill areas tab, and this was thinking about the ease out of 10 for each of my different categories. Before starting the game, I had a fairly good idea of which of the categories I would find more difficult, in particular vitality and physical health. I'm not the greatest at doing things that are good for my physical health, so I ended up rating that one even lower than a 4 initially. This ease out of 10 score helps to dictate the number of points required for each of the levels, with a lower score or something that's like harder to do, like a 3 out of 10, meaning that you don't require as many points to level up in that category. I was finding though I was leveling up too fast, quote, quote, too fast in vitality. So I ended up bumping that number up to a 4, because obviously I was finding it a little bit easier than I initially predicted it to be. This was actually really nice because when you think about things like the Wheel of Life or Level 10 Life or anything where you're taking each of your life areas and rating them out of 10 based on satisfaction, oftentimes I will rate things quite low, kind of a harsh marker. So having this data to kind of play with and say, hey, you're not actually finding it that hard, things aren't going as bad as you thought they would be, it was kind of an interesting data point to look at. Another one that I ended up changing though was prosperity, because I had originally rated that at about a 6, I think it was. But as the game got underway and as I started doing things, with some of the changes that I've made around managing my finances, I was finding it a lot easier to do. So I bumped that number up to an 8 because I was obviously finding it easier than I initially predicted. That's the nice part about using the spreadsheet though, is that when I go and change the numbers in this ease out of 10 column, it just automatically changes the point level calculations for me. I don't have to go and do all this complicated math myself. If you want this spreadsheet for yourself, we do have it linked in the description box. It is a purchasable item. It's not necessary for playing the game. It's just a lot easier to do the point calculations and keeping track of the totals and stuff like that without having to do all that math yourself. The next change that I made was with regards to the leveling system, and in particular thinking about the number of days required to reach new levels. If we have a look at my one on the left versus the kind of original copy that is the purchasable from the shop, which has my original breakdown of number of days, you can see that some of them are kind of the same. So, 7 days required, 14 days required. Then we start to get some changes. So to reach level 3, I decided that it should take me 28 days, or roughly a month or a cycle, to get to level 3, which then notably has flow-on effects for what you need to get to, say, a level 10. Not only does this new system help with having too many levels achieved in a short span of time at the very start of the game, but it also means that in theory level 10 should be achievable this year for me. Previously, I had that I'd need 623 days, probably, roughly, to get to a level 10, which is 2 years. And I'm probably thinking that with my game and the way that I'm doing it, I'll either add new levels next year, so, reaching level 11 and stuff like that, or I might find that I want to try a different gamification process. It is literally just February. I still have some time to decide, but the idea of having to take 2 years to reach level 10 didn't really sit so well with me. That and the fact that I felt I was leveling up too quickly in just the first month of the year. I wanted to be able to have that feeling of accomplishment from getting to a new level a little bit more spread out throughout the year. As said though, because the spreadsheet does all the math for me, I just had to change the numbers, it'll change the point required. So for instance, if I go and type in oh yeah, you need 1,000 days to reach this level, it goes through and calculates how many points would be roughly appropriate for each of the different skill areas for that span of time, based on the other data that I have in the spreadsheet. Undo that before I forget what the number is supposed to be. Another change that I made, which was more so just a simple addition at the very start, was putting in a rewards tab so I could keep track of not only the rewards that I had in theory achieved, but also what the rewards were. Yes, I do already have this in my everyday journal, but I thought that having a digital copy just makes this spreadsheet a little bit more complete. I could also have an area down the bottom here for ideas for prizes or ideas for awards that I could include. I haven't assigned them to any of the categories or the levels yet, but that's just down there as a little bank of things that I might want. I also went and added in a current level section down the bottom here, just so that I knew where I was up to. So for instance, I'm now on level 4 for prosperity, so this one should be colored in with the light purple to say I have, in theory, gained that reward, even if I haven't necessarily given it to myself just yet. As said, one of the biggest changes that I've made throughout the first month is just adding in more tasks to my game. I did do a fairly thorough brainstorm before I started to think about the things that I might want to include and number of points required for them, how many times ideally I would be doing them. So that's what this information here means. So what are the number of points for it? How many times in theory am I going to be doing it per cycle or per month? And thus, how many points should I be accumulating across each month or cycle for those things? This information is what the spreadsheet uses to be able to tell you roughly how many points should be for each of the different levels, for each of the different areas. But another change that I decided to make here was taking projects out of here. I had actually gone and listed a whole bunch of projects that I wanted to do in each of my life areas, but I was finding that when it came to logging my tasks, which is what gets done in the task log. If we jump down to the bottom so I can show you what this does, you chuck in the date, we'll say today, you put in the category that it's under, we'll say prosperity, and then the drop down menu here gives you the different things you can include, or the stuff that you've decided is part of your game. I had listed out a whole bunch of different projects which were coming up in here, but given the fact that a project only typically gets done once, I didn't want it to sit there for the entire of the year, kind of cluttering up the other stuff that I'm hoping to do on a more regular basis. So instead, I decided to put in a little projects section. So it's like, oh, is it a basic, an intermediate, or an involved project? Then clicking on one of those, it tells me how many points that would be. I can add in the notes section then what that project is, rather than listing all the projects individually. So removing projects from the task section, that was a change. Also just adding in new tasks that I wanted to include in the game, that was a change. And then by doing that, it obviously changes the number of points required for each of the levels, but as I said, it is done automatically, so it doesn't feel like a big hassle to change. Because it is a fairly automated system in terms of the calculations, I don't really have to change all that much outside of just recording what the things are in the spreadsheet. I wanted to keep a projects log in here as well, so we've got some projects that I'm working on. Not all of them, I do need to go and add some more, and I also put in a space to write down when they were completed. We have the task log though, which hasn't really changed, but I have been using it really well. I've been very pleased with how this has been working out. And then I also went and added in a section called a task set. This is mainly so that then I don't forget to record things that I commonly do. Effectively, I have two task sets here. It's not very pretty in terms of its formatting, but it works. We have the daily task set, or things that I'm hoping to do every single day, and then the Monday task set, which is stuff that I just do on a Monday. I know there are definitely going to be other changes that I make to this throughout the year, but so far it's working fairly well. Even though there have been changes, I'm really enjoying my gamification system. It's actually kind of impressive how much it has motivated me to do these things outside of work. Like, I'm drinking so much more water than I have been previously. I'm actually making the most of my time off. I'm actually taking time off. Crazy notion that. So if you wanted to gamify your life as a way to incentivize you to do things, to find more life balance, anything like that, then we do have the introduction video that explains how the system works and how you can get involved. That one's worth checking out, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.